Welcome to True Freedom, a new podcast for you. If you're searching, longing, if you know there's something more you need in life. I'm your host, Richard Stokes, and our guide for this podcast is Bodhi, Aldridge, transformational leadership coach, author, teacher, and great friend of mine. Each week, we jointly explore a topic or a theme that's likely to matter to you and your life right now. So far in series 1 of True Freedom, we've talked about the concept of true freedom and ways to attain it. We've looked at beliefs, parenting, relationships, money, leadership. Yes, all the important stuff. And we are blown away by the response so far. So it seems we're in the right areas for all of you. Reviews for a podcast are really critical, and you're being super generous with these so far. You're saying it's a breath of fresh air. It's authentic and raw, so simple yet powerful, a gift. And I'm sure they mean Bodhi when they say that. So just a few headlines so far. And as I say, we're really thankful for those reviews. And many of you have written directly to us to let us know the immediate impact this podcast is having in your daily life. So thank you for that. So please keep getting involved with reviews, with questions, with your feedback, and do share the podcast with a friend who you think could use this wisdom too. So to this week, and we're talking about the subject of communication, another foundational subject area, and we want to create more value for you around this area with some real clarity. Okay, so communication in some form has actually come up in all our conversations so far, and you've asked us to double down on it. So we think this is an area of interest for many of you. And the great news is we can actually find true freedom by communicating better, by communicating more, and being more honest and truthful with ourselves and those in our lives, whether that's work, home, play, everywhere. Communication, obviously, covers it all. So plenty to explore today. And I'm going to say hello to Bodhi, who's just fresh actually from a retreat in Central Australia. So Bodhi, how are you and how are you feeling after some days off grid?
Yes, thanks, Rich. Very excited. And yeah, and amazing. We had a 5-day retreat, took some male business leaders and business owners and really connected with the land and went off grid, and it was beautiful. And I'm integrating, coming back in, and it was an amazing journey.
Brilliant. Well, very, very envious of that. And we've got a few other retreats coming up in Europe, actually, so which I'm getting involved in. So very excited to be part of those. And communication, what a massive subject, foundational, as I said, but we're going to put our true freedom lens to it today. And come at it. So let's start with, when we're talking about communication, what does that mean to you? How can we give it some levels of definition that are going to be helpful and useful for today?
Yeah, it's fascinating, language and words, given we're talking about communication, because for most people, when you hear the word communication, and if you looked up the meaning, normally it would be something about the transmission of information, the sharing of information. And whilst that's obviously a key part of it, the word communication comes from the word commune. And commune means to make whole. And when people hear the word communication and relationship, which are hand in glove, often they think it's with another person. Yet the key to communication is the communication and relationship you have with yourself.
Wow.
And this is where the true freedom, because this making whole, this communion with self is an integral part to experiencing true freedom, to experiencing leadership, relationship, parenting, marriage from the inside out. And that's the foundation for this work and these conversations, Rich.
Yeah, I love that. And again, already, I think we've shifted into a space that maybe not often talked about when it comes to communication. We've all, in the world of work, probably been on programs, courses, in terms of how to communicate better. And that's all good, I think, if we can get ourselves into that headspace. But as you say, often that is, well, that's going to involve me, listening to somebody else, speaking in a certain way to somebody else, looking at someone's nonverbal communication, and that's with someone else. But rarely, if ever, do we start with this? It's with myself first, which is off, as you said, this is when we're thinking about our true freedom take on things. That's where we tend to start. So I'm glad we've landed that with people. Let's go a little bit deeper on that. So what sort of communication are we often having with ourselves, or maybe could we have with ourselves? Let's start there.
Yeah. So once you start to reflect on that, and it's interesting running leadership programs with organizations and working one-on-one with male leaders around the globe, because often when I start with this, there's a level of, oh, okay, I've got to do a bit of self-reflection here. I've got to do a bit of connecting with I thought it was just about getting the team on board. Can't you just help me with that? And so, as you say, the models out there around body language and tonality and everything are relevant, yet at a deeper level, the way we communicate and relate with ourselves, which is the essential piece. So communication, the fundamental piece around communicating with ourselves is the self-talk. And as we've discussed, 80,000 thoughts a day, most of them are negative. So if you're running that self-talk, that inner critic, they're not good enough, as we've touched on in previous episodes, then that's going to impact any external relationship. The common denominator in all of your relationships is you. So communication through self-talk is crucial. And the other crucial piece around the relationship with myself is to get present with the emotions. And again, emotions are just energy in motion. They're not good or bad. They're giving you information. They're communicating with you. The fastest way to know what meaning you're giving your experience is how you feel emotionally. We know this through the neuroscience. We know this through the heart math studies, that our emotional body is taking in information together with our thinking mind. And so that's the foundation. And we'll dive a bit deeper about the other ways we communicate and relate with ourselves. But normally those two areas are a great place to start.
Yeah, I'm getting this real sense of the importance of tuning in with ourselves. What's going on for me? What am I feeling? What are my emotions telling me? And I think in our busy lives as householders, as employers, employees, we often seem to put that to one side. That emotion right now, can't really deal with it. Can't really have that going on. Don't really need that in the team. But that is intrinsic to us tuning in and getting this information. So if I'm in the right sort of territory with this tuning in, how can we, and we've talked a little bit around this obviously in the past, how can we better tune in with these emotions, this energy that's in motion that you talk about?
So one of the foundational practices that I teach and the bedrock of the work that I do is presence. And presence is essentially the ability to get connected with yourself, and connected with how you're receiving and perceiving the world. And often what happens is that because our thinking mind is in overload and in our culture heavily valued, we're often only perceiving through our thinking mind. And so the thing about tuning in is when you get present and embodied presence, which is the ability to go deeper into yourself, you start to realize that you can perceive the world through your emotions, through your intuition, through your energetic field. And this is how you start to understand and become more aware of what's going on for me. What's this information giving me? How am I communicating with myself? How am I relating with myself?
And I think although the concept might be kind of new to people, I think people will get the idea that the more present I am, the better my communication tends to be, right? Because I'm not distracted, because the negative self-talk is turned down, because my interest in when we come to communicating with other is heightened because I'm really leaning in and tuning in to what they have to say, what their body language is saying as well, when we get into sort of non-verbal stuff. So I'm sure people will get that the idea, even if the concept of it is maybe slightly new language.
Yeah, it's fascinating. You talk about distraction. So the three responses, when we start to resist life, and as you know, we talk about flow or resistance. So normally when we're resisting life, the responses are we either express, we either suppress, or we distract. And a big part of this work, particularly working with leaders, with men, with children, families, is the journey from distraction to presence. That's a foundational part of where I start with most of my clients, because there is so much distraction, whether it's through work, through emails, and obviously through social media. One of the big comments I get working with couples is often from the wives is, can you just get him off the phone?
That's hit a certain nerve with me. That's my wife says about my own behavior. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a great strategy to distract yourself from being present. Yeah. And interestingly, like being present, we get to feel our emotions. Again, it's energy and motion. Yet when you really understand, emotions are just giving you information, that they're part of the human experience, that we don't have to judge them, we don't have to resist them. Then absolutely you are more connected with self and with other. And when we look at relationships, so if we're in a relationship, a heterosexual relationship, one of the deepest desires for the feminine energy is presence. Yeah. And your presence is communicating. Remember, the feminine energy is driven by connection and love, connection and love, connection and love. Yeah. I want to feel the connection. I can't feel connected if you're not present. If you're distracted, if you're on the phone, if you're thinking about work, whatever that might be. And so, if you want to effectively communicate more with other, you've got to start with being present and notice what's going on with you.
Yeah. Isn't it ironic that a medium of communication, our phones, completely distracts us from great communication and inhibits us to communicate when we think about it? And again, we all know this, but we are, and I can personally say we're addicted to our phones, to this level of communication. So that was express, suppress, distract. These are these three sort of levels. So there's plenty going on in distract. So what are we trying to do here? Is elevate ourselves to that point of expression?
Well, the thing with expression in that context is normally it's the expression when, again, working with men, when they just let their anger out. So it's not a hygienic or responsible expression, which is a slightly different context.
Okay.
Yeah. Men get triggered. One of the responses is to vomit their stuff all over the place.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Because they haven't been taught how to feel it. They haven't been taught how to be hygienic with it. And the other common one, certainly for a lot of the men I work with, is suppression. Yeah. Little boys don't cry. Yeah. We were taught to suppress and repress our emotions. And it's fascinating when we look at depression, which again is another epidemic, if you like, in the Western world. So depression is years and years of repression and suppression of emotions. That turns into a biological imbalance, a chemical imbalance, which we label depression. But in Eastern cultures, what they know is that, so in Hindu culture, in Ayurveda, if somebody's experiencing what we label depression, they work with the heart chakra. In Chinese medicine, they work with the liver because they know that you store emotions on your liver. And anybody who's suffered depression or has someone close to them with depression, what we know is the way through is feelings release. And the Western world, obviously medication is important. It has its place. Yet to really get to the deep part, it's because these emotions have been suppressed and repressed. Usually very sensitive people who didn't have the tools, they'd walk into a room and pick up everybody's stuff. And so that's essentially one of the responses. And working with men, what I know is fundamentally, in my experience, coaching, thousands of men around the globe, it's not that men don't want to be vulnerable and feel their feelings. It's that they just need to feel safe. And the fastest way to create safety in a relationship is through presence. And so when we come to relationship and communication in relationship, your presence creates safety.
Okay. So back to that keyword, that foundational state of presence when it comes to actually, as we say, not letting certain things get in the way of our emotions and communication, this sort of express, suppress, distract elements, which for me, I know I scribbled those down, and that feels like a good watch out, because I'm sure we're doing all three at various points, and a lot of this work is being aware of, I was over expressing myself there in a probably unhealthy way, or I'm just, why am I keeping this thought down when I should be releasing it, or I'm just choosing to distract myself because I just don't want to go there.
Yeah, exactly.
With this
and for the listeners who are wondering, what else could I do? The resourceful thing to do with emotions is to acknowledge, experience, and choose. Okay. And again, I'll unpack that. So remember, as we've discussed in previous episodes, the external world inherently is meaningless until you give it a meaning. And we're giving it a meaning through our filters, which again, we can touch on today if we have time. So whatever happens externally, you give a meaning through your filters. And what happens is, if you really slow this down and thin slice it, and when I work with clients, what you realize is that at some level, something happens externally, and unconsciously, I choose how I feel. I'm the meaning-making machine. I'm not doing it consciously. Stimulus response. An example is, you're driving to work one day, you're really late, it's an important meeting. You really want to make a good impression, and someone cuts you off in the traffic. How do you feel, Rich, when that happens?
Angry, annoyed.
Yep.
Triggered.
Exactly. 2 days later, you've got up, had a nice coffee with Dee, played with the kids, you're cruising to work, someone cuts you off in the traffic. How does that feel?
Go on your way gently, just look after yourself and the rest of the world. It's very different. Very different.
Exactly. So who chooses your emotions?
It's me in both of those instances. It's
exactly.
All
me. The external experience, you get to give a meaning. And the reason I emphasize that, if we come back to acknowledge, experience, and choose, fundamentally, you do have the ability to choose how you feel emotionally. And so acknowledgement, the word acknowledgement means to recognize what is so. It's not judging it as good or bad. It could be a cloudy day, there's gray clouds out there. I can acknowledge, the clouds are gray. Judgment is, the clouds are gray, it's going to rain, it's going to be a crappy day. And so just acknowledging what you're feeling to yourself. Remember, it's just energy and motion. And there's only 4 emotions you're ever going to feel. Mad, sad, glad, and scared. These are the only buckets you're going to experience emotionally. So when you acknowledge it, then it's about experiencing. Experiencing it is to move towards it. Remember, what we resist persists. If you resist your emotion, it's gonna persist. It's gonna get suppressed. It's gonna keep bubbling. It's like a little dog yapping away at your heels, and you're trying to ignore it. And it just gets louder until you turn around, look at the dog, and go, "Hang on a second, what's going on here?" And the studies show it takes 90 seconds to feel a feeling. And there are many great techniques out there now on how to feel your emotions. Box breathing, 5-7-8 breathing, I think it is. There are lots of techniques. Essentially, what you're doing is you're experiencing. Remember, acknowledge and experience. I'm feeling angry, breathe in this moment. And the third is you get to choose. So if you're in the middle of a meeting, an important meeting, and you get triggered, it might be useful to choose to be calm. Stay present in the meeting, have a calm conversation. Yeah. And then go for a run after work. Have a swim, have a scream, move whatever got triggered. And so this is the opposite of that place of, suppression and distraction and unhealthy expression.
Yeah, fabulous. And, from where we started from the get-go here in terms of communication, really looking at self first, which is, as I thought, is a not a usual point, but a very valuable point to start at. And now we've got through to understanding our emotions, tuning in with ourselves, being present, and then all the way through to choice. So what I'd like to switch gears here a little bit and get more into, okay, we started with the communication with ourselves. We've understood where we are. How can we start to now better communicate with other off the back of that?
Yeah, absolutely. And the key is to know, going back to the example of the car cutting you off in the traffic, we are meaning-making machines. That's all we're doing. In every moment, we're giving meaning to the external world. And the way we give meaning to the external world is through 4 key filters. And we've touched briefly on this in a previous episode. And so the 4 key filters, which go from most conscious to least conscious. So remember, 90 to 95% of your day is your subconscious mind. So self-awareness, relational awareness, leadership awareness is becoming more aware of your subconscious. So these filters, the one you're most conscious of is your experience. What informs your experience are your beliefs. What informs your beliefs are your values. Yeah, and again, just for our listeners, remember that beliefs are something we hold true. Values are something we hold important.
Right.
And values are just contextual beliefs. If my value is health, my belief is it's useful to exercise, for example. And the deepest filter, the fundamental operating context, set up between the age of 0 to 7, is I'm not good enough. I'm not valuable and lovable. So when it comes to relational communication, what's happening is no 2 people filter the world the same way. No 2 people listen the world the same way. No 2 people interpret the world the same way. And so if you want to become a more effective communicator, what you've got to realize is when you speak, what you mean goes through these filters through the other human being, whether it's your partner, your children, someone at work. And the filters are there to help make sense of the world. We get so much information, billions and billions of pieces of information each day. And what they're doing is they're deleting information. They're distorting information. They're generalizing information, and they're nominalizing information, which again, we can go through if we have time.
Right. So that's the purpose of these filters is to do those 4 things. I think you said delete, distort, generalize, normalize. So we can take this barrage of information that's coming our way and make sense of it.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. That's what's happening in each moment. And so if you want to be a more effective communicator in a relationship, the 2 fundamental tools, which again, a lot of our listeners would know, and none of this is rocket science, but I invite people to be really rigorous. And anybody with teenage children, please listen carefully right now, is if you communicate X, whatever X is, you've got to really check in with what they hear. There is no such thing as being misunderstood. If I communicate X and you hear XX, I haven't effectively communicated. It's my responsibility. The meaning of your communication is the response you get.
Wow. Okay. So again, in there, just to unpack this a little bit, because I think often we're in a position of, I've said what I needed to say very carefully, clearly, gently, with the right intention. If you haven't understood it, that's on you.
It's on.
Right.
Oh, you mean that's the old way?
That's the old way of thinking.
Yeah.
You know, again, I'll put my hand up. I've been there, doing an
Yep,
amount of that. But I've taken responsibility for my stuff. Now you take responsibility for taking that on board, and as you say, putting it through your filters, and you understand it. But I've done my job.
Yeah.
But what we're saying is an important check-in here that needs to happen.
Well, there's no freedom in the former, because you're at effect of the external world. Yeah. The true freedom is I take responsibility for my communication. Yep. So it's my responsibility to check in and go, what did you hear? What meaning did you give that? What's your understanding of that? Like, and take your time until you get some alignment. Yeah. It's again, from presence. If I'm present, again, in business, 80% of communication is mopping up miscommunication.
Yeah, I can. I can see that.
Exactly. It's because people aren't present, they aren't clear, they aren't taking time, they're too busy, to-do lists, emails, all those things. Get present, get clear, and check in.
Yeah.
And again, we do this at times, but my invitation, particularly, I've got 4 children, 10 grandchildren. Yeah. And I know when they were teenagers, it was doing my best, to see what their filters are. Because it's going through their filters. And so often I'd say X and they'd hear XX. Yeah. And again, I'm a lot better at this. I certainly haven't mastered it 100% of the time. I'm just more aware to take responsibility as best I can.
So, I mean, you've touched on it, but what would be some ways of checking? What's some nice language that people can just start to adopt and use? Because I mean, a lot of what the feedback we're getting from the series is there's these practical tips that we're dropping in. People are really taking and using. So how can people apply this?
Yeah, exactly. And if we have time, we can talk a bit about context, or do it in the next episode, which is a part of this. So essentially, if you think about it, and if you get present, if you're genuinely concerned about being an effective communicator, and you're genuinely interested in improving your communication, the 3 keys to leadership and communication are connection, compassion, and curiosity. So it's not using these tools as a weapon. What did you hear me say? You're not listening. Are those ears painted on? All of that old stuff. If I'm connected, compassionate, and curious, then the language I'm going to use is, I just want to check in. What did you hear me say? I'm interested to know the meaning you gave that. Now, this isn't patronizing, and obviously listeners are going to develop their own style, but I'm genuinely interested because I want to be a more effective communicator. Yeah. And so it literally is just those simple terms, but it's the intention and the context from within which you do that. And the flip of this, Rich, is when someone communicates to you, feedback, check in. What I heard you say. Yep. The meaning I gave that. This is what I'm hearing, because I'm genuinely interested. My wife and I, often she'll communicate, and we'll talk again another time about the masculine and feminine styles of communication. And I genuinely want to really be clear what she's communicating. Yeah. And so as best I can, I feed it back. Amal will ring me and say, on the way home from work, can you get some milk and tomatoes? As a man, I have no idea what that means. Is it low-fat milk, high-fat milk, 2 liters of milk? Is it Roma tomatoes, cherry tomato? I honestly don't know. Yeah, because the masculine communicates literally, and very linear. And so if I catch myself, often I forget the milk, but if I catch myself, I'll do my best to feed back and go, I just want to check in. So, 2 liters of low-fat milk, and 6 Roma tomatoes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, if Amala was talking to a girlfriend, it might be different. But for me, yeah, and you know yourself, as guys, often we're very literal with our communication. Yeah. So again, I'm just doing my best to take responsibility for my filters. Not good or bad. I'm just like, I just want to be clear.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love the sense of the responsibility on both sides of this. The responsibility as you imparting, and the responsibility is I'm listening. I'm hearing what you're saying, and this is what I'm taking. Is that what you wanted to say? Again, you'll find your own way of expressing this.
Yeah.
And it might feel a little awkward and a bit unnatural to start with, but I think this is all about, as we talk about, life is the lab. Just go and use it and see what works for you, and see if you start to get better outcomes from communication. And I think a lot of this, I speak personally in this, is when we're pressured, time pressured, feeling maybe a bit triggered by what's going on around us, our tendency is to do less of this. We sort of come in, when we can expand out and go, from a point of, as I say, from, I want to connect, I want to be compassionate, and I want to be curious. Three great reminders, I think, is like, okay, let me just check in. Because that, call it 10 seconds of extra, can save minutes, hours of pain later that you're trying to mop up, that I think anyone in any kind of relationship can relate to.
Yes, and any of our female listeners in relationship, with the masculine, when we go back to delete, distort, generalize, and normalize, I don't know how many clients tell me, that the masculine. So the example I use is, husband and wife. Wife rings up husband and says, "Are you free Monday night?" He's like, "Sure." She's like, "Great, we're going to my mum's for dinner." He's like, "No problems." Yep. Monday comes around, 6 p.m. He's not home from work. She's getting a bit anxious and rings him and says, "What time are you going to be home?" He goes, "What do you want to know?" She's like, "We're going to my mum's for dinner." He goes, "Oh, I thought you said you were going to your mum's for dinner." Just deleted the key part of the communication. He didn't want to go to the mother-in-law's. It's like, it's going on all the time, guys, whether you like it or not. Yeah. And it's about, these little violations of effective communication that then cause tension, then cause emotions. And the block in every relationship will come down to an emotion that isn't being shared. And the block in every business will come down to an emotion that isn't being shared. So being able to acknowledge and communicate your emotions, not from "you made me feel something." That's the old paradigm. I'm just feeling something. I get to choose my feelings. If you can create a safe environment by being present and vulnerable, whether it's in your relationship or at work, and an open, honest feedback loop, you will unblock so much of what's going on. Most of our listeners would have been to a meeting where you walk into the room, the boardroom, and it's like you can cut the air with a knife. There's this tension.
Yeah.
All that is somebody or several people are sitting on a truth they haven't shared about how they feel.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Let's dive into this, because this little non-verbal communication, I suppose, we're sort of stepping into now. And something along that realm, but getting into the truth of why it is so, I think, is really interesting, because I think we've all been in that position. We've walked into a room, and before, as I said, anyone said anything, you feel, "Oh, wow, something's going on here." And isn't it amazing, as human beings, we can pick up on that?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And the studies are fascinating. Now, the Heart Math Institute, which a lot of our listeners would know, have been studying. So when we walk into a room, our heart, the senses of our heart are picking up hundreds and hundreds more information than our thinking mind. And now the studies around our gut and our intuition are that's processing as well. And because we're energetic beings, again, presence is being connected with self and your energetic field, then absolutely we're picking up energetically, emotionally information. And then all the, the micro cues around body language and eye language, eye contact, all those sorts of things. This is happening far beyond our thinking process.
Yeah.
But the feelings piece is the one. Yeah, it's that emotional piece, which again, the heart is such a great guide. Yeah, because we know, particularly when we're present, something energetically, isn't aligned here. There's something that hasn't been shared. It's like going to a dinner party with some friends and a couple arrive and there's that tension. It's like, somebody was running late and the other person got annoyed or whatever. It's unsaid, but suddenly, oh, this feels different.
Yeah.
Yeah. The interesting thing, just to close the loop on the boardroom, is when you walk in and it's like you can cut the air with a knife. What's fascinating is as soon as somebody is willing to share how they feel, what happens to the room, Rich?
Oh, it's like I got this, the pressure just comes out. It's like a balloon.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's not a burst balloon. It's just gently lets out. And you can see, I've been in these rooms many, many times. And you can see people take a breath, shoulders come down, frowns slightly disappear. And it's the whole, again, probably not said, oh, thank God they said that.
Exactly. And it creates another level of safety that somebody's told some truth. And to close the whole loop around this, communication and relationship with self is being aware of how you feel emotionally. Communication and relationship with other is about taking responsibility and sharing those emotions, not you made me feel. Yeah, that's all that happens when that decompression in the boardroom. It's like, I feel a bit anxious. I feel like this meeting's going nowhere. Not blame, not judgment, just acknowledgement.
So that's the key language there. It's the I, it's I'm feeling, not, hey, Terry from accounts, you're making me feel like this. Why do you do this all the time? Confrontation. It's, I'm feeling a bit anxious about this situation. Can we talk about it? Can we go back a step on the agenda?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Because we all know it's happening. It's like when you walk into work and ask someone how you're feeling and oh yeah, everything's great, everything's fantastic. And underneath there's this volcano, they're ready to take someone's head off. It's like, hang on a tick. Congruence is a big part of communication. Yeah. And congruence is my energetic field aligned with what I'm saying. Yeah. And often it isn't.
Okay. In there's so much about honesty as well. And expectation, I think, as well. People ask that question, how are you feeling? Some ask it from a genuine point of view, and others, we know it. I'm not really asking. I don't really want to know. It's the transactional piece. But I think when you really get in, when you really ask that question, back to your point, connection, compassion, curiosity, when those are true, so much more can come out. And you move from the, fine, all good, all fine, looking forward to the meeting, and that the pace of the language, the energy someone's got in them is incongruent, as you're saying. To how are you really feeling about this? Just another question.
Yeah, and as you were sharing, I realized that we will do an episode on sincere honesty and truth, because that again has been distorted through the old paradigm of communication. People don't really understand what truth really is through the I language, as you say. And I think it's an important part of relationship. It's definitely an important part of communication, and it really unlocks so much. And as you mentioned at the start, that sincere honesty and truth with yourself, communicating with self, being honest with yourself, and then how that applies in relationship is another aspect for sure.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, I love about our conversations. Also, we set out on a topic and we emerge with 3 or 4 more that we know we will come back to at a later date. This series, next series, not sure, but we certainly will. And just so much comes up, just for me in these conversations. So it's priceless, really. And so just hopeful that just these noticing this awareness around communication, as you said right at the beginning, it's starting with self. Just watch what difference that could make in your everyday, right? Whether it's at home, whether it's at work, or wherever your workplace happens to be, whether it's out and about in your areas of hobby and other people are in your community. There's so much more that we can do when we really get super present and tune into what's going on. So yeah, this has been another treasure trove of wisdom. Before we tap out for this one, Bodhi, is there anything else that you're sitting with that's come up here around the subject, the broad subject of communication, or anything that we've jumped into that you want to share with listeners?
I think just a reminder, the common denominator in all of your external relationships is you. And you have the opportunity to really be clear on the way you communicate and relate with yourself. And who is the self that I'm bringing to those external relationships? Because when you're grounded, when you're present, when you're honest with yourself, when you realize you are whole, coming back to communion, loving self, I am complete, I am enough, there is enough, then it's a very different person that you bring to external relationships, external communication. But when you come from the not good enough, from the self-judgment, you're projecting judgment into the world, when you're, coming from frustration and anger that you haven't moved or acknowledged, you're going to have a very different external relationship. And so I just want to really anchor that in as a foundational piece around this topic. And, we'll talk more about relational communication and relational leadership. If I can encourage the listeners just to, it's so empowering. And it's the one thing you have 100% control over. And so, to me, it's a gift and a tool that you can use if you're willing.
Yeah, beautiful. That was coming to me with this, we're back to our higher idea of true freedom. It is attainable by you. It's a choice you can make. I choose to think about my communication, to feel my communication in a different way, to take some time, to take some steps, to really feel into it. So I think that's beautiful. Amazing. Bodhi, thanks so much. I'm glad that retreat obviously did a lot for you. Bringing that energy into the episode today. So thanks a lot, Bodhi.
Thanks, Rich. And look forward to the feedback from the listeners.